One. Welcome back. I'm Alfred Lambremont Webre, and we're here for our TrueTube panel with our panelists, author and hermeneutist Peter Kling, and with our concept innovator from the UK, Seven. Now, Seven is on her way. She may be having technical difficulties because as you know, Seven has challenged and has actually won a litigation amongst very powerful interests in the UK, and they seem to be blocking her access at the moment. So Peter and I are going to go ahead because Peter is coming to us leading our panel this week with a very interesting proposition on upper theater, which I will allow him to describe. Okay, Peter.
Well, Alfred, as you know, we've talked about upper theater a lot. And I think a lot of times in some of the things that we talk about, and I realize in a lot of the things that I talk about, I could be talking to somebody and I'll be speaking a totally different language. But to kind of explain upper theater, we could take it right back to something that everybody will have a concept of, and that is as above, so below. So now we're dealing with two different realms. Now, most of the population get a concept that, okay, we're in 3D here, and we make reference to 3D. And we try to gather what's beyond 3D. I remember doing this as a child. You know, it's like, okay, I got 3D. And I know 4D is like time, involves time. But what goes beyond 5D? Well, flip the script. Thank God we've got string theory, which explains that we live in a 10-dimensional multiverse, with the 11th dimension being time. Now, some might add a 12th dimension, but the truth is it'll go on indefinitely because of the way that the math is. But that fact that we're in a 10-dimensional multiverse is significant because 10 is the biblically complete number for Earth. And think about it. We have 10 fingers, 10 toes. We're based in 10. It all syncs up. And it also, we have the spiritual number of 7 being, quote, God's number. Well, the interesting thing is when you break down string theory simply says that in order for us to exist here in our, quote, 3-dimensional world, there needs to be 7 other spatial planes which have had to come before us, or at least simultaneous, for us to even exist, which would indicate, or which would mean, according to the mathematics here, is that we live in dimensions 8, 9, and 10. Okay, so we're talking upper theater, lower theater. Let's talk physical, non-physical. That's probably a better way of putting it. We think of everything in the physical, and when we start thinking non-physical, we get lost because we don't have anything to touch, feel, see, smell. There's no longer those dimensions which are being added in. And so if it doesn't exist in the 3-dimensional world in which we believe we live in, then it can't exist, except once we take into consideration upper theater. Upper theater has been affecting lower theater since time immemorial. We were created at least simultaneously, if not the first 7 dimensions. And we can go back and look at all the dimensions, but we're not going to do that in this episode, perhaps further on down the line. But we're going to look at the physical world, or our 3 physical dimensions in which we are part of, who we actually really are, and then upper theater. Upper theater contains the gods, the prophecies, all of the passion plays which are carried out not just within Scripture, but also within the culture of the world. And it's interesting, here within the last 20 years, we have had the oldest, most prolific book ever in history be replaced essentially with the Anunnaki texts. And I'm talking about the Bible now being replaced with what was pulled out of Sumeria and spearheaded by I believe, Freemason and NASA connected. Oh shucks, and his name just escaped me. Forgive me, Zecharia Sitchin. He opened up the door, and there was a lot that Sitchin wrote. And I'm not an expert on Zecharia, but there was a lot of what he was writing that I questioned, and so did a lot of other people. And we went back and kind of looked at this historically, and most of it centered around this Nibiru. But the interesting thing is that since Zechariah's work, not only do we have Nibiru, but we have the return of the Anunnaki as well. And I'm talking about that in a cultural sense. There are people on this planet that worship the Anunnaki, just as there were 5,000 years ago. Is this a cult? Yeah, I guess you might be able to call it that. Is it a sect? I'm not sure, because I look at the Anunnaki as my archenemy. The Anunnaki gave us religion, and they gave us government as control mechanisms. Now, when I say they gave us, let's go back to the cradle of civilization. Where does it take place? It takes place right, essentially, along the Tigris and Euphrates River, and where is now Iraq.
Oh, here's our other colleague.
Super.
7?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Welcome to our panel in session. We are now in session, and this is on the air. So
Right.
Peter is holding forth. So just join us. Peter, why don't you continue, but maybe give a little context.
Okay. Essentially, what we're doing is breaking down upper theater so we can better comprehend its relationship to our physical world and what's going on here today. Because all of this stuff, when I say stuff, all of this, the ancient records were recorded for our time. It's all now. It all is happening right during this time period, our lives. And that's why we've hit this critical mass here on planet Earth.
Right, okay.
So
greetings, Alfred and Peter.
Greetings, 7.
Yes, nice to see you again. I did send you a message today to see if we could kind of talk beforehand so I get an idea of where you were going today. But I'm here, I'm listening in, and I'll chime in when I have digested what you've said, and, you know, if I have some input to put in.
Sure, absolutely. And I'm going to break this down more historically so we have a better comprehension of the history behind it, and yet still keep the context and show, because we have to see the relation.
Sorry. I'm just going to jump in here because
sure.
If you go back to the beginning with that phrase, which really struck me, and I think that 7 might get it, when you said that the Bible had been replaced by the Anunnaki text.
Oh, yeah.
That's when a light went off. And if you could start from the beginning and just go ahead.
Yeah, sure. If we look back at this, about 20 years ago, and this started with Zecharia Sitchin, and at this time he was being backed by NASA. You know, let's take a look at this. But for 3,500 years, really, since the first recordings of Moses, of the scriptures, 3,500 years ago, with Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and Numbers there, we have essentially had those books in print for 3,500 years, and the Bible has been the most prolific book in print ever around the whole planet, essentially since my family and others helped Martin Luther while he translated the Bible from Latin into German to be printed on the Gutenberg press. The Gutenberg Bible is the most valuable Bible on the planet because that's what started the Reformation, really. People could read it for themselves, what was going on. And they had a true concept that they were being lied to by the church. Big surprise, it's still going on today.
So,
but,
Peter, can I just ask you a question? When you say the Bible, are you talking about the original Bible where they had the Maccabees
Well,
and the Apocrypha and all the different books. What's it? The Book of Enoch. Because obviously a lot of books have been removed from the Bible as we know it
from
today.
let's just stick with this with the 67 books, the 66 books which are in the biblical canon, which most of us have today, and the seventh book being the Book of Enoch.
Right.
I think they took the Book of Enoch out of the Bible because if you read the Book of Enoch, you'd never read the rest of the Bible. So, just my opinion. It seems to be totally. It supports the whole story from Genesis to Revelation, right in the Book of Enoch, essentially, with a lot more detail to what we're dealing with here again in upper and lower theater. But, you know, here this document has been replaced within the last 20 years. It's been replaced with the Anunnaki or the Sumerian text. And so the Anunnaki essentially are making a reappearance here on planet Earth after 5,000 years.
Wow. So in the last 20 years, Peter, you say?
Yeah, well, just with it, since Zecharia Sitchin's work. Well, let's take a look at Zecharia Sitchin. He's a Freemason, or at least I believe he's connected with the Freemasons, and we know that he was connected with NASA. Never a straight answer, NASA? Yeah, kind of like, let's get the word out there, and let's start replacing what people believe is true. The whole flat earth meme, which has come out, it was presented by the CIA. I have to believe that they're doing it to calculate just how dumbed down the general population has become. Because now you've got the whole conspiracy theory crowd. Half of them think the earth is flat and the other half of us know that it's a sphere. And if you have any doubts, go research the Great Pyramid of Giza. If you have enough intelligence to figure out the Great Pyramid of Giza, you'll realize why the earth is a sphere. So I'll leave it at that. There's a puzzle. But, you know, here we've had this document that we call the Holy Scriptures or the Bible, which has been totally replaced by the Anunnaki text, to the point where we have Anunnaki worshippers on the planet again today. Anu, interestingly enough, Anu is the king of the Anunnaki, and he is a god over a flat domed earth. We never went to the moon because we can't get past the dome. Or is the moon really under the dome? See, I'm not sure. But what I like is what is it, the Hindu explanation that the earth is flat. It sits on top of 4 elephants riding on the back of a giant sea turtle flying through space. I like that idea. But we know for reasons of physics and higher levels of learning that the earth cannot possibly be flat. Regardless, it is still a spaceship traveling through space. But, you know, here we've adopted all of these things, and this is where upper theater is meeting lower theater, but it's based on one continuality. When we look at the scriptures do not take into consideration anything to do with the Anunnaki or the Sumerian Empire, which was started by Nimrod. The reason being was that was the beginning of a one world government. Noah was given the edict to be fruitful, become many, and spread out across the earth. The whole purpose for the building of the Tower of Babel was to keep the population condensed. And so you get very little about what's going on in Sumeria, just that it started by Nimrod, who was a mighty hunter, the great grandson of Noah. So it's 3 generations now after the flood was over. So there's only stories now of the great flood, but still now all of a sudden we get this alien invasion of Earth because we get the Sumerian texts which talk about the Anunnaki. And after we're told about Nimrod, this mighty hunter, that the next chapter in the Bible deals with the building of the Tower of Babel. And this is where the languages are confused and the people finally do spread out around the world. That's why we find cuneiform writing in South America. That's why we find the same periods in South America as we do in the Middle East. You know, they're all step pyramids, and I'm sure they're under Antarctica too. Let's think about that. So here's this interaction between upper and lower theater. And by understanding what's going on upper theater, we can foresee and predict what is going to go on, or say, make the claim, this is happening now in lower theater, as above, so below. Now, it happens upper theater before it happens lower theater, okay? But now I want to digress a little bit. What the scriptures cover is not the Sumerian Empire. It got its mention, Tower of Babel, over and done with. The story within the scriptures really starts from that area, because Abraham is taken out of the land of Ur, which Ur at that time would have been like Abu Dhabi to today, you know, a showcase city. And basically Yahweh said, you're the only person who worships me. You get your gear together, and we're going to go form a promised land that your family is eventually going to be in. And from there, they wind up in Egypt for 400 years. So the story really starts with the first world empire, Egypt. So, and we know those gods the best because we've been studying Egyptology for several hundred years. Napoleon really got into Egypt, and we've learned a lot since then. Especially within the last 100 years, at least what wasn't covered over by Zecharia Sitchin, who's probably the biggest thief in all of Egyptology. But that's neither here nor there. But we know the Egyptian gods the best. Isis, Horus, Set. Some people know them all. We build our structures today based on ancient Egyptian structures. We follow that same religion today. Flip the dollar over, what do you see? The all-seeing eye in the Great Pyramid. Right back to Egypt. You look right in St. Peter's Basilica there, right within the Vatican itself, and what do we see? An Egyptian obelisk. Why is there an Egyptian obelisk? A penis of Ra in St. Peter's Square in the Vatican. You catch the connection? You see who we're worshiping here? We're still worshiping upper theater Egyptian gods. Think about it.
In Washington, D.C. as well, isn't it?
Yeah, you've got an Washington's obelisk is bigger than Ra's obelisk. Yeah, isn't that wild? Think about that. Washington's obelisk is bigger than Ra's obelisk. Now, there's a hint there, because the United States in upper theater is the last country to be dealt with. You see, it keeps the United States and England keep their identity while the rest of the world are sucked up into a one world empire. Oh, aren't we starting to see that now? I wonder why Nikki Haley decided to jump out of the UN when she did. Of course, you know, that's a whole nother thing, but we're going to cover a few scriptures which actually deal with these beasts. And that's the way it's laid out in Revelation. And it's being able to comprehend the prophecies. And here's the thing. Very important to comprehend the prophecies, because those who control this planet comprehend the prophecies well. Their main goal is to twist the Abrahamic covenant so that they could receive the benefits of the covenant. And they are the satanic empire who are controlling this world. At the upper echelon, the eye, are the Satan worshipers themselves. Then you get all the other little sects that break down. And then under the pyramid, who are not even part of this organization, are you and me. And thank Father Yahweh, we're not part of that organization, because that organization will be totally destroyed very shortly. Just as we see what's going on in American politics, and most likely politics around the world, where it all of a sudden looks like I'll call them the good guys, and I'll refer to why I'm going to call them the good guys. Those people who still have a respect for the Constitution, or believe they do, those people who still respect family, those people who are tired of being oppressed, those people who have been beaten down and have not said anything, those people who make up the backbone of every country on this planet, those people who are the meek and shall inherit the world, are now making a statement. Interesting. We're seeing this, right? You're making a statement, Seven. Alfred's making a statement. I'm making a statement. We are those who have kept silent for so long that we're not staying silent any longer.
Absolutely.
It's time for the world to wake up.
Well,
And
the
so,
144,000, or the 11th hour workers, which is also referred to in the Bible. Peter, would you agree?
Yeah. Yes, to an extent. Yes, to an extent,
Right.
and we can cover that because my mentors were certainly part of that group. Those people are no longer on this planet. The last one of them that I had seen, 1975, but they were in my life for 15 years constantly. There was several of them always in my life. They were my instructors. They were the ones who taught me the history and the prophecy. And now where we fall into place, we are the latter day prophets. If you go to Acts, the 2nd chapter, the 17th verse, Peter is talking about, he's quoting Joel, and he's saying that, Joel is saying that in those days, in the last days, some of God's Spirit will be poured out upon all sorts of flesh, and your sons and your daughters will prophesy, and your old men will dream dreams, and your young men will see visions, and even upon my men slaves and upon my women slaves, I will pour out my Spirit, and they will prophesy. So you see, we kind of have a bunch of different people involved here. It's not just any one, but it's a group of people. So in some cases, it's those of us who consider ourselves part of the family. In other cases, it's those who are helping or who are waking up, who are saying, oh, I got a piece to the puzzle, and yes, you do. And so, yes, and we can have dual roles. So it's not that we're excluded from one group and only confined to another group, because as above, so below. And so we already have a dual role in comprehending what's going on there. And if we look into our history, our personal history, many of us will start to find that, oh, there's interesting connections back through history. But our history has been hidden from us. It took, the only thing I knew about my family for 50 years was that we were bell makers in Germany. That's all I really knew. But it took that long for the information to come out that, yeah, we also helped start the Reformation, and the church tried killing us off for close to 300 years. And no doubt there's a curse against my family, me and my family. And so I have to think, well, that explains a lot in my life on how I survived so much and have gotten to this point. We're involved in that upper theater battle. Our fight is not with flesh and blood, but our fight is with wicked, unseen forces in heavenly places.
Ephesians 6:12.
There you go. And so we have to put on the complete suit of armor when we are involved in that fight. So there are some of us like you, myself, and no doubt Alfred and many others are involved in that fight where we've experienced, we've survived a bizarre life.
Absolutely.
There's no other way to explain it. We've survived a bizarre life to all come to this point in time.
Absolutely. Gosh.
So I just want to go into a few, trying to comprehend upper theater. It's interesting. You look at some of this, as every time I reread the scriptures, I was like, yeah, there's another part. But I want to start off with this one segment in Matthew, and it's a prophecy, and it's a prophecy of dire consequence. And it's interesting, if you've read the Coburn Bible, it also questions the same thing in chapter 3. It does not paint a pretty picture for our future. However, it does say that those strong of heart will survive. So the forewarned is forearmed. But here's the thing, and this is where I'm going to start off with, and this sounds like a very ominous prophecy. because these are Jesus' own words himself, Matthew, the 24th chapter. And he says, this is the 21st verse, for then there will be a great tribulation such as not occurred since the world's beginning until now, no, nor will occur again. In fact, unless those days were cut short, no flesh would be saved. But on account of the chosen ones, those days will be cut short. So you have to be a chosen one. You have to be part of an elite group, you see. Because if you're not one of the chosen ones, well, wait a minute. Who are these chosen ones? You see, the group is not as elite as what you may think it is, because the chosen ones are us who choose, those of us who have made a choice in order to stand on the side of righteousness, those of us who know who our family is. Remember, upper, lower theater, we're not just lower theater, we're upper theater connected too. Our body is contained, our physical body is contained to lower theater. Our spiritual consciousness is part of upper theater, and we are visitors here in lower theater. As long as we who are those of the woman's seed. Well, who are the woman's seed? Yeah, probably about 50% of those on this planet, but it's those people who are able to activate their DNA in order to draw that out, because we can consciously control our DNA, at least to a minor extent, in order to focus on what is truth, what makes sense. And so once we start to comprehend upper and lower theater and why it's important, then we can look at the world from a different viewpoint to get a lot more insight into what's going on there. So now I just read these chosen ones, this elite group. Let's go to Revelation, the 7th chapter, and we'll find out a little bit more about these chosen ones. And 7, you mentioned the 144,000. That's 12,000 out of each of the 12 tribes of Israel. However, this is spiritual Israel, not physical Israel per se. So, and there's a difference. When Jesus was on the earth, it was basically the 2 southern tribes. The northern 10 tribes had already been assimilated into society, and who knows where. But we're talking about 12 tribes of not just of the followers of Jesus, those who followed Yeshua, and put themselves in the position of being his brothers. Remember, Yeshua is the evidence of the woman's seed. Was it just one seed? No. By this time, we're talking about 3,000 years, and so that seed would have been blossoming quite nicely. It would have been out of the descendants of Abraham, essentially, being part of that Abrahamic covenant.
Can I just ask something?
Yes, absolutely.
Because you know, there's been a lot of talk about the Council of Nicaea. Are you familiar with the Council of Nicaea? And that Jesus, the letter J, obviously wasn't around at that time. That's why
well, yeah, that's a lie too. I wrote about that in Letters to Earth. Sorry, folks, there's no J. We'll have to use an I. Wait a minute. How did you know there was no J? So that was done in an effort to change the name of Yahweh into a more satanic version. It went from Jehovah, when they translated it, into Ehovah. You know, it's interesting. Right. Indiana Jones
so in what was what is said about there not being the letter J.
Yeah, it existed. It was there. No, it wasn't true. But they were translating it into Latin. They were translating the name Yahweh or Yahuwah, which is the correct name for the Father or the Creator, into Latin. But they didn't, remember, this is a deception that they're pulling. It hurts their ears. Think of the word Yahweh or Jehovah. It flows, or Yahuwah. Those words flow. They carry power within their names. That's why we can command the unseen wicked spirit forces. But anyway, when we change Yeshua as well, it flows as well. But however, what they were doing when they were converting it to Latin and getting rid of the J and replacing the Y in placing with an I, it changes the whole tune. Now instead of Jaha, it's I. What? I? There's no more rhythm to it. Jehovah, it hits it, and it's hard hitting as opposed to softly flowing. So they were doing their best to change the meaning of the name into something that would glorify Satan, because that's what the church is based upon. Now, we know this. You go back to certain parts of the Bible have been deleted. However, the work. My education was in the 66 books that we have, plus the book of Enoch, and in science. I never learned the dogma or doctrine. It was the science that I come back. That's why I can back this stuff up with science. That's why fractal science and string theory are very important. Also comprehending the biology of it and genetic engineering, because it's all involved. But to continue with where we are, those chosen ones. How few are those chosen ones? We see after the number of 144,000 are sealed, John goes on to say, and look, I saw a great crowd, which no man was able to number, out of all the nations and tribes and peoples and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, dressed in white robes, and in their palm branches, with palm branches in their hands. And they kept crying out in a loud voice, saying, salvation we owe to our God who is seated on the throne and to the Lamb. A great crowd were the chosen ones. I think that's fantastic, you know? So as long as we do our job, this is the result that we have. And so that's, you know, it's one of the reasons why the future is ours. It's ours to choose. And so we're bringing this light into this world to say, okay, here's the difference, upper and lower. So there's a lot. It's not just a select few. It's not just these elite who are satanically controlling the earth through child pornography and sacrifice. They've enslaved us. They've enslaved us religiously, politically, and they have us sacrificing our children to them. That's totally sick.
Totally sick.
Yeah, and so we need to comprehend what's actually going on here. Now, we can start to get a feel, but here's some history. We have to go back about 200 years, because we're going to deal with some beasts in Revelation to get upper theater and comprehend where we are in the stream of time. But let's back this up. With the Council of Nicaea, they added books, they took books out, I don't know how somehow it all got reduced, but the whole Council of Nicaea was to put together the Bible canon, which was reduced down to what we have today. It's pretty much backed up by the Dead Sea Scrolls in a lot of ways. The one thing that we do have to be careful of, and I totally reject, are the Gnostic texts. The Gnostic texts were the wolf that would enter the flock, which was foretold would come when all of the apostles were dead. And that's what that is, and that's been woven in as well, especially through New Age and more modern beliefs. Oh, Jesus never died for our sins. Jesus was just another prophet. Wait a minute. Gnostic text, Islam? Yeah, the church probably used Gnostic text to create Islam, or the basis for what has become Islam now. Which is interesting, because we're going to head right there in understanding what's going on. So let's take a look at some of these beasts that we have in Revelation, because we just talked about, okay, a great number is going to survive this great tribulation that Jesus talked about, which is already underway, by the way. These things we've talked about before, some of these things. At least we have anyway. But let me just, I'm getting to the screen that where I want to start out here, actually, where, let's start with Revelation 13, because this is where we kind of are now, but we're going to then digress and then come up and go ahead. Revelation 13 talks about this composite beast. John sees this beast ascend out of the sea. And he says it looks like a leopard, but its feet were those of a bear, and its mouth was a lion's mouth. and the dragon gave to the beast its power and its throne and great authority. Okay, so what is this composite beast? It's got the body of a leopard. It's got the feet of a bear, and it's got the mouth of a lion. Now, it also has 7 heads and 10 horns. So there's 7 heads that are essentially lion's heads on this beast, and 10 horns. These 7 heads signified 7 world powers. The 10 horns, the 10 kingdoms that represented those powers. But it's an interesting composite group of beasts, and these were beasts that were taken out of the prophecy of Daniel.
Yeah, I was going to ask, are you talking about Nebuchadnezzar's dream?
They're tied. They're tied together. But
Okay.
who is the symbol of those beasts together? The leopard was Persia. Today, the bear is who? Russia. And the lion is who? England. But you see, this is a composite beast dealing of 7 different world powers: Egypt, Assyria, Babylonia, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and England, the United States. The United States has become the superpower, and it kind of sprung from England, who ruled the world for almost 200 years, sprung from Rome, and Rome was just caved in on itself due to its own immoral lifestyle, and it reemerged as the Holy Roman Catholic Church. I always found it interesting that the Roman armies couldn't conquer Germany, but they were able to conquer everybody religiously once they came out with a religious message. And it was a false religious message that they came out with, which is why the Reformation took up so much power. And so the Holy Roman Catholic Empire is essentially based in ancient Sumerian religion. Wait, right back to the Anunnaki? Yes, right back to the Anunnaki. And indeed, the religions of all the 7 world empires, and we deal with them today, but Egypt, Assyria, Babylonia, Medo-Persia, they were all different flavors of the same religion. And in ancient Sumeria, under Nimrod's empire, you could worship whatever you wanted to worship. There could be a god of whatever you wanted to have a god of. And that was the great thing. You know, if you wanted to worship, you wanted to get out and parade your sexuality, you could worship sex. If you wanted to parade pedophilia, you could get out and parade pedophilia. You see, you could do whatever you wanted to do back in ancient Babylon under the Anunnaki. You see, it was freedom of speech, freedom of expression with no recourse or recompense. As a matter of fact, when ancient Sumeria was taken over by Semiramis, it was during Semiramis was the whore wife of Nimrod, and she was a prostitute. She, historically speaking, because you don't find any of this in the scriptures, she was picked up in a brothel during one of Nimrod's conquests. On his way home, he found Semiramis. She basically applied her trade to the top of the list, and it was during a drunken New Year's orgy celebration that they substituted Nimrod for the lamb, and Nimrod, according to one account, was literally ripped apart and eaten raw. Hey, anything goes. It was ancient Sumeria. The Anunnaki were in charge. Who's in charge today? Upper theater or lower theater? You see how this works? What are we finding out? The pedophilia of the church. And what are they doing to our children? They're sacrificing them in the most horrible way. Alfred, we'll let you talk about this more now on the commodity of child meat and how it comes into the Dracos and what controlled by something just happened. Hold on. It seems my I'm getting. Everybody see me okay?
No, you've disappeared, Peter.
Interesting.
You're not there. No.
Well, hold on. Maybe come back. What is this? You guys are so funny. Okay. Anyway,
your camera just went off. Yeah. No, but you're quite right. It's been now. There's a system of international treaties the Greada treaties going from 1933 Roosevelt, 48 Truman, 54 Eisenhower, the Tau 9 treaty with Bush 1. These are with the Draco, Orion Gray, Anunnaki complex, which essentially do a quid pro quo. The United States becomes the front, essentially the front nation to occupy the earth on behalf of the Draco Reptilian Alliance. That's why the US has 175 military bases. They're essentially the front for the Dracos, for the reptilians. And in return, there are quotas that the United States has to deliver. And this is based on actual testimony from whistleblowers at US military bases who deliver pallets on a monthly schedule of human baby meat in tins that are delivered to the Dracos under, and the reptilian forces under the treaties, human body parts, human sex slaves, human slaves for the solar system trade, for the intergalactic trade, loosh, the human loosh market, which is the byproduct of the souls of humans that are slaughtered at a particular time. It's slaughtered so that the soul shatters and is bottled, and that is consumed and is distributed throughout the planet, throughout the solar system. The estimates have been as high as 60 million that I've seen are in the slave shops in the solar system working for the secret space program that is under the Rockefellers, under the Rothschild Rockefeller. For example, Richard B. Cheney, the vice president under George W. Bush. Cheney flunked out of my class at Yale. George W. Bush was about 4 years behind me at Yale undergraduate. Cheney ran the Mars Colony Corporation. So these are just like planets that are run like sweatshops, and where they're abusing laws, there are no laws that apply, etc. And so we humans on this planet are essentially treated like cattle under these, and so it's magnified in the so below as above, upper theater, and then lower theater, the so below human society that we have here. And we see those spectacles, and it's in this so below here that it gets confused, because then it gets translated into human politics, and you wonder, oh, which party's on the side of the angels, which politician is an embodiment of the good guys, and that's a lot of dispute. What I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, I located this article that is based on exclusive information that we had from, in a way, a whistleblower, a person who had intimate business relations, essentially the publisher, one of the publishers of Sitchin, and it was the 2012 to 13 Nibiru flyby meme hoax. Did Zecharia Sitchin cooperate with U.S. intelligence in setting up the 2003 invasion of Iraq and the 2013 Nibiru flyby meme, and also his translations of the so-called manuscripts and I'd like to read from that because I think it's relevant to what Peter talked about. And this is just some testimony, and people can get that. I'll put the link in the article accompanying this. This reveals a long-hidden secret in the life of deceased author Zecharia Sitchin, who lived from July 11, 1920 to October 9, 2010, that he was an advisor to the U.S. Department of Defense in setting up the 2003 illegal invasion of Iraq, and that he knowingly promoted a fraudulent Nibiru hoax as part of an Illuminati global fear-based plan to usher in a New World Order global dictatorship through public fear and terror generated by a 2012 to 13 Nibiru flyby meme. During his August 1st interview, Mr. Webre summarizes his conversations with an unnamed confidential source who had intimate business relations with Zecharia Sitchin over the course of many years. This is a former publisher. According to this source, Mr. Sitchin's translations from the Sumerian were subjected to analysis by an expert translator who found them to be an utter fraud. And this is the publisher who Zecharia Sitchin came to with his supposed translations from the Sumerian tablets, which then were published by this publisher. And then in the middle, once they were published, the publisher had second thoughts and went to an expert translator, and the expert translator from the Sumerian went back and retranslated and found that to be a fraud, that Sitchin had fabricated the translations. Sitchin, for his part, was extremely litigious about his translations and would sue any individual publisher or firm that sought to do independent research on the Sumerian translations and texts. Mr. Webre's source speculated that the deep pocket Sitchin had in pursuing wide litigation was part of a strategy by the intelligence agencies he served, which included the Mossad, to protect and develop the Nibiru meme he had developed for a wider PSYOPs application during a 2012 to 13 Nibiru flyby PSYOPs. Independent researchers Michael Heizer PhD and Jonathan Gray also found Mr. Sitchin's translations and story of the planet Nibiru to be fraudulent in the fabrication, and the Sumerian text Sitchin allegedly translated not even exist. A summary video of Michael Heizer PhD's presentation exposing the fraud of Zecharia Sitchin, watch video here, states, Michael Heizer PhD says that Zecharia Sitchin is a fraud. He states this on the record, not as a matter of opinion, though, but as a matter of fact, and he further maintains that there is no proof even of Sitchin attending any college class for even one semester, and that Sitchin is no language expert at all. Even more damning that is that the, quote, ancient Sumerian texts that Sitchin says support all of his claims do not even exist. Sitchin was working covertly as a part of a global plan of a global elite to implement a new world order using the planet Nibiru, Sitchin's own invention, and the popular fear of a global catastrophe as a disinformation tool to herd humanity into accepting a global dictatorship. According to Sitchin's biography, Sitchin was born in the then Azerbaijan SSR of the Soviet Union, but was raised in mandatory Palestine. He received a degree in economics from the University of London and was an editor and journalist in Israel before moving to New York in 1952. While working as an executive for a shipping company, he taught himself Sumerian cuneiform and visited several archaeological sites. Mr. Webre states that his confidential source a former close business associate of Sitchin, assisted the U.S. government in its planning. Sitchin assisted the U.S. government in its planning of the 2003 illegal invasion of Iraq, based on Mr. Sitchin's advice that the U.S. government should invade Iraq to capture several interdimensional portals located in Iraq. Mr. Sitchin allegedly based his advice to the U.S. government to invade Iraq and capture several interdimensional portals on his translations of Sumerian texts that themselves were fraudulent. According to Mr. Weber's source, the U.S. Department of Defense relied on Mr. Sitchin's advice in planning and carrying out the invasion of Iraq. Mr. Sitchin reportedly visited the Pentagon for consultations. It is not known whether he was financially compensated. The capturing of several interdimensional portals in Iraq, as set out in the Sitchin translations as being a driving motive of the U.S. government, is also supported by independent research. This independent research does not mention that Sitchin's translations were themselves fraudulent and that the U.S. government either was duped by Sitchin or went along with Sitchin's translation fraud as a PSYOPs cover for the 2013 illegal invasion of Iraq. Nibiru did not cause the great deluge of 9500 BC. Anyway, I could go on and on and on. A core component of the 2013 Nibiru flyby is that Nibiru is an earlier flyby triggered by the great biblical deluge that launched Noah's Ark and that destroyed Earth in the great maritime civilization approximately 11,005 years ago. Well, it goes on to certain things. Okay, so that's a view that we got from his publisher, who went and allegedly contracted an expert translator in cuneiforms and said, look, these things that, first of all, this is a fraudulent translation, and then other people say, these are fraudulent tablets. So there you have it. Peter, over to you.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Well, thank you for that analysis, first of all, and bringing that to the table, because I've been kind to Sitchin, but I'm well aware of Sitchin being sussed out, and people just look at him as a god. But now here's in their own way, it's like, oh, he's done so much. Well, wait a minute. Sitchin had a relationship with who? Let's see. It's been sussed out that he was Freemason and that he was had connections with NASA. And I'm sure you can find pictures of Richard Hoagland with Zecharia Sitchin somewhere too. It seems like that's in my memory. But regardless, here is this whole narrative that's been put out there, and who's controlled the narrative? You see, who controls the narrative of what we're being told about extraterrestrials, UFOs, aliens? It's all controlled by the government itself. We can't get away from the fact that anything that we're told either comes from a whistleblower who's been involved in a government program and is now telling us and allowing us to gather this information without getting a bullet in his head, or so it's still a controlled narrative on what we are allowed to learn. Mm-hmm. And it's all built around this whole extraterrestrial upper theater control of planet Earth. And so when we go back and we look at this, where I was talking about the creation of this beast, this composite beast, I'm going to digress here just a little bit, because the one thing that got me in serious trouble when I wrote Letters to Earth is chapters 10 and 11, where I exposed the protocol of the learned elders of Zion. I want you to keep in mind that the Rothschilds were planning on bringing back a one-world government. Now, what happened? We go back into Genesis. Ancient Sumeria had the language confused, and people went off. They left building the Tower of Babel, and they spread around the world. And they took their religion with them. But so for essentially 5,000 years, we've had different languages until this past, again, 100 years where we invented the computer. We all have the same language again, binary. So the world has come back to one language, and throughout this whole process, we can start we can start to expose essentially the upper theater. Now, in order to get a better idea on what's going on in upper theater, we have to look at Revelation 12. And this is a great, you got to love Revelation 12, because it says that war breaks out in heaven, and Michael and his angels, and Michael actually means who is like, well, in Hebrew, and I don't know the Hebrew pronunciation, but it means who is like Yahweh. In other words, a mini-me. But it says war broke out in heaven, and Michael and his angels battled with the dragon, and the dragon and its angels battled, but it did not prevail, nor was there a place found for them any longer in heaven. And so down to the earth they're cast. And so when did this actually happen? Can we pinpoint a time when we have this happen? Yeah, we can actually. And here is where we're going to digress and go back. If we go back to the Napoleonic Wars, now keep in mind that we're going to go to 1815. Napoleon was pretty much done beating up Europe and had gotten trashed by Wellington. I have that right? Yeah. He was pretty much done, and they wanted to redraw the lines of Europe. And this was at the First Congress of Vienna. And at this time, the Rothschild family had captured the Bank of England, the Bank of Germany, the Bank of France, and pretty much they set up their banking system in Switzerland and in Italy, dealing with the Vatican during this time. But they were the ones who were actually trying to form a one world government to get a club going of all the European leaders at that time, back in 1815. They were thwarted by the Tsar of Russia, Tsar Alexander. It was, I believe, it was Amschel Meyer Rothschild, or Meyer Amschel Rothschild, it was one of them, said to the Tsar of Russia, Tsar Alexander, that my descendants would see your descendants wiped off the face of the earth. And so how long did that take to happen? A little over 100 years. So it was 100 years after that, after 1815, what did we have? The First World War. When we go back and look at the Protocol of the Learned Elders of Zion, that allegedly came out of a meeting held in Basel, Switzerland in 1897. And that was a plan to repatriate Jews back to the Promised Land, back to form the state of Israel. So that was the goal of the Rothschilds 100 years earlier. And so now here is that they formed the Congress of Zion, who was working on this again to repatriate the Jews. And so what do we have come up after that? Well, the Bolshevik Revolution, Rothschild's words are fulfilled. The Tsar's descendants are wiped off the face of the earth, and Russia goes communist. And now we have what comes after that? Here comes the wild beast. So we have war in heaven, which starts, and we have this composite wild beast which ascends out of the sea with the bear's paws, the body of the leopard, and the head of lions, with 7 of them with horns on them. And we have an establishment of the League of Nations. And we also have, out of the First World War, is the Balfour Agreement. But what we don't have, or the Balfour Declaration, which essentially ensures that Palestine will be the future homeland of the Jews. But what we don't have happen is a mass exodus of people to leave Europe to go to Israel. That doesn't happen until after the Holocaust, when we have what? Oh, the United Nations. So here's this composite entity, this composite government, essentially in the United Nations. And here is the upper and lower theater correlation. Beasts are always governments. Who set up the United Nations? Essentially, look at the people behind it. You've got the rulers of the world. The Satanists are setting this up. So there's that correlation between what is going on with the dragon in Revelation 12 gets thrown down to heaven, has great anger. We have the First World War come about. We have the League of Nations come about. That fails through another world war, which induces, we get the Holocaust. A Holocaust means whole burnt offering. It was something that was done as an honor to the gods. 6 million Jews burned, and yeah, okay, maybe it wasn't 6 million, maybe it was less, but regardless, people died, and they were incinerated, and there was a Holocaust, and it was a whole burnt offering to their satanic god, because after that, they created Israel, the state, which was the first thing that the United Nations did. But as this goes on, it also talks about, in Revelation 13, it talks about another beast, a two-horned beast that looks like a lamb and speaks like a dragon. Not even like a lion. It speaks like a dragon. And it's given great powers. It can do great things. It can even call fire down from heaven. Let's see. A country which could call fire down from heaven. You mean like the United States during World War II, which called atomic fire down from heaven upon Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Or maybe England, which dropped hundreds of tons of incendiaries upon the German towns of Dresden and Hamburg and burned those cities to the ground. Or it's the same thing happening in Tokyo by the United States. Burned Tokyo to the ground. 250,000 people killed in that fire. Call down fire from heaven. Interesting. Looks like a peaceful lamb, but speaks like a fierce dragon. And so here we have another composite beast. This is the false prophet, what's called the false prophet. A lot of people turn around and say, oh, that's the Pope, he's a false prophet. No, the false prophet is a composite beast made up of the United States and Great Britain. And haven't the United States and Great Britain been involved in a lot of what's gone on in the Middle East? Like all of it? All in the name of peace. We've killed millions, destroyed homes and families. All in the name of peace. We've acted like a dragon, breathing fire down upon the populace. I say we in those countries, not me personally. I would have nothing to do with them. But here, this is what we are actually seeing, the power that is given to the United States. Everybody wants to do business with the United States. And Trump is saying, yeah, we all had bad business deals with you, so we're going to rewrite the book. Ooh, interesting, because this wild beast, this false prophet, creates an image. And it's an image of this beast that ascends out of the sea. It's an image of the United Nations, but it's not the United Nations. And what we are seeing are the seeds being planted for a different kind of one world government that will bring an end to religion. And so we get that 666 beast that comes about. You know, the one that you cannot buy and sell. It forces people to worship it. And that might sound like a pretty extravagant thing to say, considering that Trump is actually trying to reestablish the Republic of the United States. Got to do away with half the swamp creatures before you can deal with the other half. But just remember, when the church, when religion goes down, there's going to be a lot of upset people. And so here we have this upper and lower, constant upper and lower fight until it all comes to an end. So we're being forewarned about these things. We just have to look at how they're actually playing out in front of us, because we're at the culmination of this. Now, it's interesting. We've got Trump's Space Force. We've got the Anunnaki. We've got all of the gods of yesteryear. We've got the extreme left that wants to see, I just read this, there's some other politician now that wants to reduce the age of consent to 10. Oh my God, are these people just out of their minds? Oh, well, if we reduce the age of the consent, just think of all the pedophilia people who will be out there and they won't be pedophilia anymore. Yeah, it's like seriously. We have to start to clean this act up at least a little bit, because we have to enter a time of peace and security in order for these things to work out. And where we are actually going to be headed is toward that time, but we're going to have a probably a segmented one world government, because there's a lot of bits and pieces of the prophecies that have to come together yet and be fulfilled. But what we are seeing now is the setup. It's the setup. You have to plant the seeds to take down the pedophile church and all of its supporters. And they're going to start through treason. That's going to play out here in lower theater before too long, and that's something that we have to be cautious of. This gives us commentary from the dog too. I apologize for that. But this gives us a little bit of insight into how this plays out between upper theater and lower theater, and how all of this comes together. There's one thing I wanted to actually look at. I got to find this real quick. It's in, let's see, I believe Revelation 19, where oh yeah, Revelation 19, and this I want to leave everyone with this thought. John, the Apostle John, is receiving this, and 7. Here's where you can comment. Be ready to comment on this. John is receiving this message. All of these different things that he's upper and lower theater. Essentially, he's getting the upper theater version. But the angelic creature who is telling him, gives him this message, and John says, and he tells me, right, happy are those invited to the evening meal of the Lamb's marriage. Also, he tells me, these are the true sayings of God. And this is the important part. At that, I fell down before his feet to worship him. But he tells me, be careful, do not do that. All I am is a fellow slave of you and of your brothers who have the work of the witnessing to Jesus. Worship God, for the bearing of witness to Jesus is what inspires prophesying. So we are not alone in this. We also have allies who are not from this world, who are our brothers, who are working with us and directing the work. So, 7, your comment with that.
Well, I mean, I've written down quite a few things, and I'd like to comment on all of it if you don't mind, and we can maybe summarize at the end with what we've just said. Few questions first, Peter. You mentioned that the Bible was rewritten 20 years ago with Anunnaki text.
Not rewritten, replaced. In other words,
okay.
Yeah, in other words, it was taken on the side, off to the side, and don't believe the Bible. We've had stories where, let's see, Jesus is a Buddhist. He never died for us. Well, that's Gnostic text coming out that we ignore. And the latest one, Jesus was from the Pleiades. It's like, oh, right, he gets around now, doesn't he? So it's all, yeah, how about Jesus is the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, coming back with the armies of heaven?
So, can I just ask you, are you referring to the New Kingdom Bible? What is it called? The New King James Bible? No, it's not the New King James. There's a new version of the Bible that came out, I think probably about 20 years ago. So are you saying that particular version?
No, I'm not any particular version. What I'm saying is what we have accepted as biblical text, what we accept as the Bible.
Right.
All of a sudden, God's dead, the Bible's no good, but what we have to do is follow the Anunnaki text, because the Anunnaki texts are real and the Anunnaki are coming back. Wait a minute. You see how that doesn't make sense?
I see where you're going with that. Okay, I just wanted to establish that.
No, okay. There are, and there have been changes made to the scriptures, but they are products of an anomaly, which we'll all have to talk about sometime, and that ties in with the 2012-2013 hoax of Nibiru, because we did have a time fracture then. Time split 2013, and so we got the Mandela effect from that. But here again,
Right.
upper and lower theater.
Right. Okay.
So
All right. So let me. I'm here. I'm hearing you. I understand. So basically, what you're saying is the whole New Age phenomena that has sort of been put in there to replace. It's been, you know, I mean, obviously, we have. Well, this is what I see anyway. This is what I personally have observed, is that the whole New Age movement is, in a way, has been put in there too. So we have the whole banner of Christ consciousness, which is being reframed with some of the things you're talking about, like the Palladians, etc., etc. So is that what you're referring to, Peter?
yeah, yes.
Instead of us, you know, sort of taking the business from Bible prophecy and understanding it, overstanding it, we have the influx of the whole New Age agenda, which New Age movement, which a lot of it, you know, is embedded with, quite frankly, stuff that you have to question, you know.
Absolutely.
I mean, obviously, I think there's a lot of people in the New Age movement that have pure intentions, you know. However, I think it is another tool, divisive tool, in order to push some of the liberalism ideas, you know, and sort of slyly and sort of, how can I say, just inject some ideologies that don't come from the Most High. That's what I want to say.
Absolutely. And you see, the more complicated something gets, the further away from the truth it becomes. In my lifetime of dedication to comprehending what's written in the scriptures, I'll bring it down to just one text. The greatest commandment, as Jesus put it out, the greatest commandment, that we should love our Father Yahweh with our whole heart, soul, and mind. That's the complete person, heart, soul, and mind. That's the multidimensional human. And we should love each other as we do ourselves. You know, we're all family. And it's interesting, love takes us out of that beta fight and flight response, and it puts us into an area of alpha where we share, communicate, and feel at ease. And it's establishing the family ties again. And so that's why we look at this as the reptilian seed or the serpent seed and the woman seed. And there's a lot of sincere people who are out there who have been duped. I mean, take a look at the holidays that are typically celebrated by Christendom, which are all based in pagan beliefs, and they know it, but oh, it's just so much fun to celebrate these holidays because the kids we're indoctrinating our children with pagan beliefs. So what's going on here?
Absolutely. Just to touch on that before because I made some notes in regards to some of the things you said, but just to touch just on that in terms of, you know, the pagan thing. If I just mention Grenfell Tower, now when Grenfell Tower happened, they had a whole marketing campaign that was to collect, you know, donations and what have you. And along with this marketing campaign came these like woven wicker basket type of hearts. Now, what we understand that these wicker basket hearts were actually something called corn dollies. So corn dollies are part of pagan rituals, satanic pagan rituals. So obviously, because Grenfell Tower was a mass sacrifice, they had put these corn dollies, which is basically, I don't know if you saw, but during, you know, the early part of the shock of it all, when people came forward to do charity singles, etc., for Grenfell Tower, And for anybody that doesn't understand what I mean by Grenfell Tower is a mass murder that took place in London on the 17th of June, sorry, the 14th of June 2017, which was Trump's birthday. It was a satanic ritual. It was mapped out on the front cover of The Economist magazine beforehand. Now, after the actual horror show went down, where my aunt and my cousin also died in that atrocity, we saw a number of people come forward, you know, and say they're going to make charity singles and all this sort of thing. And with the marketing of these charity singles, like for instance, Simon Cowell, who's, I don't know if you know who he is, but he does something called X Factor, which is a kind of reality. Is it X Factor or Pop Idol? One of those two shows. Anyway, he's basically one of the panelists on those shows, and it's a show where people go and sing or whatever. They compete to sing and to get a record deal or what have you. And in most instances, when the people go on those shows, they are forced to have to sing some horrible demonic, you know, people go onto these shows with genuine talent, you know, thinking I'm going to get my big break on these things, only to find that even if they win, they get co-opted, they get used to have to, you know, toe the line with the satanic agenda. But anyway, on that particular show, it's either Pop Idol or X Factor, I can't remember which one. But Simon Cowell, he's very famous. He does shows in the US as much as England. They decided to do a Grenfell Tower tragedy charity single, okay? Now, the actual marketing for this single, they did the single Simon Garfunkel, Bridge Over Troubled Waters, much in the same way as when they did Live Aid some years ago. They gathered all the different artists and they did a Live Aid single. This was a Grenfell single, very much like that, you know, a collaboration of different artists and different famous singers, songwriters, etc. Now, the thing that disturbed me was this corn dolly, which was basically, if you look into what a corn dolly is, it comes from pagan ritual, okay? And it is the symbol of satanic harvest. It's like they've had a mass sacrifice and the harvest is now in full bloom. And this was done in plain sight. It was so diabolical, I cannot tell you. I mean, obviously most people are not aware. They just see this wicker heart. It was a heart shape. If you type in Bridge Over Troubled Waters, Grenfell Tower single, you'll see that there's a wicker basketry. It's like a woven basket. Now, if you type in corn dollies, you'll see that these wicker baskets are symbolism for pagan rituals. And they had this in our faces blatantly after the hundreds of people were sacrificed in that building, including my aunt and my cousin. But anyway, I want to move on from that. I just wanted to touch on that when you mentioned that, because it's very important. People have to understand that we have a Luciferian construct that is in full effect right now, okay? And Peter, you mentioned, or you referenced the fact that, you know, I always speak about the 144,000, and I would like to just read something and touch on that just a little bit, if you don't mind. Bear with me, because I didn't know what we were going to be talking about fully today. I'm sort of just picking things up as you spoke, as it were. So just let me just pull it up a minute. I want to read it for, you know, and I read it in context with what you said, Peter, about those of us who have answered the call. In some of our cases, I think it's not even a question of answering the call. You know, we have no choice. You know, I mean, right now, these demons, I mean, these are the most devilish, demonic, wicked, treacherous people right now. And they, like you said, those people who come forward to talk often are faced with deaths in the most horrific ways, you know, persecution. I mean, I've had 15 years of it. Alfred, you've had God knows how many years of it. Peter, you've had many years of it. And the whole targeted individual phenomena is, if you look at and you look closely at who has been targeted and the types of people who have been targeted, you're talking about the 144,000 mostly. You're talking about people who are either people of conscience, who don't stand by and watch innocent people being brutalized, terrorized, tortured, children, etc. You know, those people who stand up for righteousness, even if, whether or not you are, you know, even a biblical follower of scripture, okay, if whether or not, if you are living in this time, if you are living from the heart and the soul, and you seek to do what is righteous, and you seek to do what is pure, and you seek to honor, because each of us have a GPS system. We know what's right from wrong. We have an inner, we're all born with it, and it wires us right up to the Most High directly, okay? And
that is the woman's seed, that specific DNA strand that we have, that other people, well, some people don't. You know, it's like any genetic variant. So one person will have more of one family trait, and another person will have more of the other family half. That is kind of what we're dealing with. But yes, it is encoded within our DNA.
absolutely, we know what's wrong. I mean, obviously, you know, there are those who have chosen to engage in the demonic activities, let's call it that, demonic activities. Treacherous, evil, wicked, vicious, vile, disgusting activities. Those people have decided to switch theirs off. You know, if we listen to the testimony of Roland Bernard, who is the banker. He's a banker that was become a whistleblower.
Yes, it's pretty scary stuff. You know, you listen to him, and if you don't have a clear picture of what's going on, you should listen to it again, maybe. But yes,
Absolutely,
a very good point.
Well, Roland Bernard. One of the things he said was when he was approached. He for those who don't know who he is, I recommend that you Google his name. And he was a banker basically, who was approached by the scumbags. They're not elite. We have to stop using the word elite to describe wicked, treacherous people. Okay, these are not elite. God's selected people are the elite, as you rightly said, people and Peter earlier. So let me just say this. Roland Bernard referenced that when they approached him to participate in the big money game, because obviously you've got different echelons, and the higher you go up the ladder, the more money. The people that are prepared to do the sickest things are on the top tiers of this pyramid structure of control, because essentially it's a pyramid structure. Now, Roland Bernard said, you know, initially he participated because he liked the idea of making money. But as he had to get higher and higher, if you want to become a part of the trillion and gazillion dollar club, that's when you start talking about sacrificing babies and doing some really sick shit, yeah? Now, one of the things he said is that in order to do it, you have to switch off your conscience. You have to switch off your heart. So basically, switch off that GPS system, which is our inner guide. Okay, it lets us know when we are going south or north or east. You know what I mean. You know, when we're literally losing our way. And if we look at, there's a book that is very, very well revered in the world of politics, which is it the 48 Laws of Power? In that book, anyway, they have different laws of how to become powerful. And if you go to most of the bookshops in sort of legal areas and political arenas, there's always a copy of that book on hand, yeah? But the principles of that book, the 48 Laws of Power, it basically tells people to switch off your emotions. The emotions are considered to be the most horrific thing ever. And this is why we have lost contact with the divine feminine principle. Because we have been conditioned to turn off that GPS system. Because this man, Roland Barthes, said, in order for him to get to the $1 trillion club and get higher in the echelons, he was encouraged to put his heart on the freezer. So that means to lock off any connection, because the GPS system operates through the heart chakra. You know, our connection to the divine operates through the heart chakra. And so if we are not in contact with our feelings, this is why the first thing that a baby does when it is born, it cries, it feels its way through life. It communicates what it needs, what it wants to say via its feelings. But somewhere along that journey, we are encouraged to turn that off. Switch it off so that we don't feel anything anymore. We don't have any empathy. We don't have any compassion. We are taught to be stones. See nothing, feel nothing, care about nothing, care about no one. Just care about what you get for yourself so that you are comfortable in your life. Doesn't matter what's happening to him over there. Doesn't matter what's happening to her over there. Switch it off. Don't feel nothing. In fact, there's a text that is being circulated through schools now to encourage children. If they see a child in the classroom that is being abused, obviously has no clothes, impoverished, they are being encouraged to turn away from that child. Instead of offering some support, you know, some comfort to the child. Children, this is today, 2018. Joe Lomax of Reclaiming Perception show, who I do regular interviews with, she mentioned that to me a month ago, that she saw these texts that are being circulated in British schools to inform. I think it was done as some sort of survey. They asked children, what would you do if it was a child in your class who looked like it was being abused, you know, had no clothes, wasn't being fed? What would you do? Would you embrace it? Would you communicate with this child? And the end game of this whole exercise was to encourage children that if they see other children, because obviously child abuse is a mega factor going on right now. So they're encouraging other children not to have empathy with other people, with other children, not to offer a hand of support, a hand of compassion. This is what is going on right now. And so this is the absence of the heart. We can call the heart, I mean, the trendy thing right now is we define it as divine feminine, okay? And that's another show, Divine Feminine, Divine Masculine, because each of us have both components within ourselves. You know, I'm both masculine and feminine, as are you, and as is Alfred, as are you, Peter, and as is Alfred, and everybody watching. You know, it's just that we have been totally manipulated to turn off this GPS system, which is the heart, so that I do not have no feeling, no love. I don't operate from that center anymore. I don't communicate from that center anymore. I feel nothing. I'm all in my head because of these books like 48 Laws of Power, which is basically, in a large sense, a Machiavellian manual. A manual of total manipulation is what I can see. I'm sure there are wisdom in there. Obviously, there's going to be some good things in there. But a lot of these laws are designed to take you away from your GPS system that we're all born with. From the, you know, and switch that off and all go to the mind. And to become cunning, manipulative. Because if we look at the word intelligence, it implies wisdom. You cannot have intelligence without wisdom, without having some complete respect for other people, okay? So anyway, let me go. I wanted to say that before I take you to this, which is to do with the 144,000. I said all that to say that we have, like you rightly said, Peter, and I spoke about this a year ago with Alfred when I spoke about the September the 23rd prophecy, okay? You can go back and watch that video. It was some time ago, a year ago now, just over a year ago. And, you know, at that time, you know, we saw that the emergence of, how can I say, the will and the desire of the people was starting to become more and more and more prevalent. You know, more and more did you see, with the election of Trump particularly, you know, we saw people chanting, lock Hillary Clinton up, lock her up, lock her up. You know, the feeling from the collective consciousness is one of frustration, fed up, completely fed up, anger, you know, disgust at the level, blatant level of abuse, total abuse of power.
Now, if I might interject just for a second, along with those same lines of thought, this is where I was talking about the seeds being planted,
Right.
is because we've seen this abuse for so long. I remember a pendulum swings on a clock both ways to the extreme. So it's swung to the left, if we want to call it that, to the extreme, where pretty much, if you want to look at lower theater, under the end of the Obama administration, it was pretty much to the left. Trump is bringing it back to the right, but it's going to keep on swinging to the right, where these same people are saying, lock her up, will be supporting this regime, and it will become a regime because the United States will keep its own power. It's not going to give up to, it's not going to give its identity up to become part of a one world government unless it's controlling part of that government.
Right.
But it'll start to swing the opposite way, where we're going to see these left, you know, like people who, in Antifa, I heard something totally ridiculous today in the city of Portland. And Alfred, being on the West Coast, you're probably more familiar with this, but Antifa essentially took over a section of Portland, and they're directing cars to wherever they want to. They just take over what they want, and the police ignore them. The policeman told them by the mayor of the city of Portland to stand down. And so these kids who probably spent most of their formative years playing Sin City and Miami Vice and let's see, Call of Duty, now get to act it out in a semi-adult or young adult life where they can start to do this on the streets, just like they learned in Sim City.
Absolutely.
You know?
Grand
Yeah.
Theft Auto and all of those types of demonic shows. I mean, console games. Yeah.
So these children have been conditioned for the last 10 years and 15 years playing these games, and now it's real life for them.
All right, exactly.
Guess what? People die in combat. And if you're breaking the laws of a country, sooner or later, expect that to come back to you. But people who are listening to this are above that. Those are the people who are being manipulated, and as you brought out, that they have turned their hearts off. They have become cold-blooded. They have become reptilian.
Right.
And when we go back to Genesis, the very first prophecy in the Bible, Genesis 3:15, I shall put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He will bruise you in the head, and you will bruise him in the heel. Now that heel bruising went on when Jesus laid down his life for us. The head bruising is coming quickly. And so it's that serpent seed which will soon receive a head bruising. And it's not going to be by us. We're not going to be the ones out beating people up. This is going to be a major head bruising by their own selves until the return of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So there's the upper theater, there's what we're seeing here, lower theater, and then we see the interactive, which is being carried out by the governments and the satanic empire controlling the world.
Now let me toss this out and just give a kind of a heads up, which I had mentioned to Peter 7 before I came in. Just because of the timing, I've got a webinar with Argentina at 4:30 Pacific time.
Right.
So that it's about 5 minutes of 4 now. So
right. Okay.
We have about 20 minutes. Yeah. Let me finish this.
Okay.
We have about 20 minutes left, and I just have one point that I want to make. But it's for me, it's a significant point. And I know that I get a lot of blowback on this point, but I'm going to still keep on making it. And it's about Trump in upper theater. And I know that it was for the first time today that because you mentioned it, Seven, that I realized that the Grenville Tower on June 14th, 2017, is that the date of it?
Yeah, that's right.
Was on Trump's birthday, which is June 14th, 1946.
Right.
Now, I want to go through this presentation. It'd take about 5 minutes, but
right.
I
just respond to you just quickly? The only thing that I would like to really do, apart from respond to a few things that Peter said, was to, talk about the 11th hour workers. But so it's just to read a little bit of it, but I'll do that after when you finish.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in terms of women's seed and in terms of serpent seed, we have the analysis of Gary Peter Carlson that Trump has a reptilian soul, which I think is, Gary Peter Carlson has been fairly consistent with his analysis. He works at the soul level, and people are welcome to view that at those interviews at TrueTube.co, newsinsideout.com, Exopolitics TV. So we're starting out with that, we have an infrastructure on this planet. I'm not sure of the total number. Some people say it's about 1 million plus reptilian souls that have infiltrated the incarnation system, and that from the soul level occupy positions of authority in our reptilian souls incarnating and running the authority system on the below here. So it's the upper level, the above, at the soul level, reptilian souls incarnating in, and that's why they continue to enforce the system of evil, war, disease, crime, and poverty, and why we, the human community, can't get very far. Well, I want to point out two things. Number one, that the Grenfell Towers, which was, as Seven has described it, which occurred on June 14, 2017, was from which Secret Service people, that is military intelligence people of the British government, are seen escaping, was a government terror operation, was a ritual sacrifice that was committed on Trump's birthday. So the question is, was that created in honor of the reptilian soul of Trump? Okay. Now, I'm not saying that Trump had to know it or be part of it, but I'm saying, was that created in honor of the reptilian soul, of the position that the reptilian soul of Trump occupies in the reptilian agenda or the reptilian panoply?
Nothing is coincidence, Alfred.
Yeah. So then I just want to, and I'm building a case here, and I'm doing it relentlessly and against Trump. I'm showing out my hand, and I've been doing it for a long time now. In the parts 1 to 3 of the layers of the global false flag industry, which I did with Oleg Damagard, whose website this week he told me was infiltrated, hacked, and destroyed. So he's rebuilding his website. Part 2 of this, and you can go to TrueTube.co, Exopolitics, you can go to News Inside Out. You will find, after watching the evidence, is Donald J. Trump a conscious participant in false flag industry operations, such as the October 1st, 2017 Las Vegas false flag industry operation with its, quote, orange man meme? And you can go to the interview that Ola Damagard and I did on the October 1st, 2017 Las Vegas false flag, where a lot of people died, and where it looks like what the Las Vegas false flag is an opportunity for various of the, we don't want to call them elites, but it's like a shooting gallery. Everybody got an opportunity, from helicopters and from hotel rooms, to shoot bystanders. It's like what the royalty in the Netherlands and in Belgium do. In their royal lands, they go and get adolescents at the halfway houses, and they let them go on the royal lands, and they hunt them, and they shoot them, and they put their private parts up in the hunting lodges, like antlers. Well, that's what they did at Las Vegas. You can go and watch this. It's a classic interview. And in it, the whole thing is around, quote, the orange man. Well, guess who the orange man is? Because Trump is part of the Las Vegas false flag. And when he comes in after the shooting to deliver what's called a capstone event. Because even under Obama, they would have the US president come in and say, I feel your pain. And he delivers, the US president, which is part of the false flag, delivers the capstone event, you know, in this pyramid. And Trump was wearing all of the mandatory stuff of the people who were part of the false flag. And he was, and throughout the false flag, the orange man is a theme, and Trump is the orange man. And you'll see that, you know, the orange man is this theme. And Trump, for many years, through Resorts International, which is a CIA Mossad-controlled organization, kept the Trump casinos going in Las Vegas and in Atlantic City. So Trump was part of the, was the orange man in the false flag industry event called Las Vegas, or the Orange Man, on October 1st, 2017, which was a few months after the June 14th, 2017 false flag at Grenfell Tower. So my question is, he was the Orange Man so that his serpent seed soul was the centerpiece and the capstone of this false flag, where a lot of people died at Las Vegas, which is Trump's city under Resorts International. And at Grenfell Tower, and I addressed this to Seven and her family, and to us as a global family, it occurred on Trump's birthday. And was this not a salute and an obeisance by the Seven-Gate criminal syndicate to the reptilian soul of Donald Trump, and a salute in this criminal syndicate? And so, in the famous French words, j'accuse, I accuse, j'accuse. Donald J. Trump, j'accuse. Donald J. Trump is not a valid POTUS. The US military, in a soft coup, installed Donald Trump as president of the United States in 2016. There is no legitimate president. We have a serpent seed reptilian soul occupying the White House now illegitimately, and he is being played unholy obeisance in false flags like Las Vegas, and unholy obeisance in ritual sacrifices. And we have one of the family members, Seven, here, of the ritual sacrifice that was done on Donald Trump's birthday as a sacrifice to the reptilian soul of Donald Trump. And this is all pagan sacrifice, and it's a horror. And I call it out right now as a horror that it is in its totality, with Seven being here, a family member, and it was laid on the altar of the reptilian God soul of Donald Trump. Boom, that's what I had to say. Over to you guys.
Well, I wanted to just respond to what you've just said, Alfred. There was also a shooting in Alexandria at the same time as Grenfell Tower. That was cartel signaling to let everybody know that Helen Alexander, who has been chief in command within the cabal, deep state cabal, as you refer to it as Seven Gate. So on the same day as Grenfell Tower, there was a shooting in America, and I think it was it was a sporting event, and there was a shooting. So it happened, Grenfell Tower and this shooting event was at the same time. So that's all I want to say about that. And thank you for flagging me up, you know, as in regards to my family. I also have to say this as well. Currently, one of the guys that is in the 7-Gate crime ring, Richard Hanna, he's basically trying to do me for malicious prosecution for actually playing courtroom audios that found him guilty. A court case which found him guilty, okay, whereby he's supposed to pay me money. This man has been terrorizing me for 15 years. I've done absolutely nothing to this man. I've gone to the police. I've got over 75 police reports. And this man is saying that he's gone to the police as a criminal, as somebody who's literally tortured and terrorized me and my family for 15 years, destroyed people's lives. He's telling people now that he wants to take me to court for malicious communications, for playing and showing evidence that shows that he's guilty.
Oh, wouldn't
And
that get him in
apparently
trouble?
the police in the UK, I mean, I don't know if this is factual. I don't know if this is factual or not, but I can tell you if you go to the Farrow report, you will see all the police reports. Apparently he's saying he's put a message out that the police are trying to locate me. I had several break-ins where the police have come to do forensics. What is he talking about? The guy is, he's absolutely gone, and it's really, really sad. But I want to let people know that as well, because it's important. In other words, this guy's trying to have me put in prison for telling people the truth about his crimes. This is what he's been doing for the time immemorial. He doesn't have the humility to stand back and think, you know what I've done to this woman is absolutely wicked. People have already seen the evidence. How is it possible that there could be any court case without this evidence? He's not thinking rationally. There's nobody wise around this man. But anyway, I'm going to come. Sorry, Peter, did you want to say something?
I was going to say none of them do that. They're off on, and Alfred, just to jump back to something that you said, about the cohabitation. I think it's a lot more than just a million or so of these cohabitated souls with world rulers. And so, yeah, that feeling gets shut totally off. And we get to witness, both sides of the coin now, because we've been involved with it. We can see what's going on personally. And they are very involved in especially Trump, with gematria and numerology. So, I know enough to be dangerous in both of those, but not enough to be accurate. However, there again, it's an occult learning or understanding, and they are using the occult in order to stay and gain power. And one thing I did want to point out is 2 days after Trump was elected president, it was the Jewish Sanhedrin that tapped Trump to play the role of King Cyrus back up Upper Theater, which is exactly where they sent us. King Cyrus was the king of the Persians. He had teamed up with Darius the Mede, and they brought down Babylon. So we've got Babylon the Great today, Upper Theater, Lower Theater, Babylon the Great being the composite world religions that are involved in pedophilia and child sacrifice and human trafficking. And so here is the replay. As for Trump's legitimacy of being president, I question the presidential elections, considering only Trump and one other president were not cousins back to King John I or Charlemagne. This has really been a satanic family affair from the beginning. Trump is just a different flavor of satanic.
Wow. That's going to break a lot of people's hearts, that believe in the left-right paradigm, that think that the Republicans are going to be the saviors of humanity,
Well,
I mean,
it'll appear that way. And so, yeah, look at all the positive things he's done. And yes, we need to see the criminal element exposed. But as I said, we're only going to see half the swamp monsters exposed, because the other half are backing Trump. Trump's just a player. He's a minor player in this, but he's a player at the largest ship in the ocean's helm. So and yes, the military is backing him. But really, Have we had, has the United States had a legitimate president ever? Certainly the last one wasn't legitimate. He wasn't even American. So we've been controlled by powers at that.
Okay.
Interdimensional powers have been controlling us for eons.
Now, I'd like to jump in here and just say that we have about 3.5 to 4 minutes left.
Okay, so I want to read this thing out.
But we're actually almost at the 2-hour mark, believe it or not.
Okay, well, I just want to say this thing. The other thing I want to emphasize as well to anybody who's watching, when you talk about Trump, in no way are you endorsing Hillary. That has to be
no. I mean, look.
Because somehow, you know, some people think it was either Trump or Hillary. So when you start flagging up Trump, we have to also recognize that the other side was just as, you know, there was no options there. Really, let's be real. There was no options there.
Flip the Anunnaki coin, whichever it comes down, head or tails, it's still Anunnaki coin.
It's a system
I understood. And no, I'm neither Republican or Democrat. And in the 2016 election, I supported Andy Basiago, a former chrononaut, DARPA time traveler, and Mars explorer, who was an independent candidate, who actually was hit with directed energy weapons and is now legally blind. And they did so because he knows that that Trump was pre-identified by DARPA CIA time travel in 1971 as a future US president, and was fully briefed on it and knew since 1971 that he was going to be a future president in 2016. So Hillary probably knew that she wasn't going to be a future president, and she blew the whole presidency on purpose. This is all a charade. This is a charade. She was faking it.
And that's why we call it theater.
Yeah. It is.
But Alfred, can I please read this thing before it closes?
Please. And then we will say until next week, and next week, 7, you come with the topic and you are the host. Okay, so go for it.
Yeah, I'm, you know, I'll open it up to all of us collaborating on that. But anyway, I wanted to read this thing because the 11th hour worker is what we call the 144,000. Those of us who have answered the call, or those of us who are the whistleblowers, the starseeds, the light workers, the twin flames who are looking for their mission, those people who recognize that we are in a diabolical mess in the world. And it's time to step up. It's time for everybody to step up and take your position. And the 144,000 are described in Acts 2:17 to 18. Just this is the closest definition for anybody that doesn't understand what the terminology of the 144,000 mean. And so it means those people who are now showing up to shut the bullshit down, okay? This is why we're here, you know. Forgive me for using the word bullshit, but I feel that it's appropriate. Sorry, people. It could be worse. It could be worse. So it says, in the last days, God says, I will pour my spirit on all people. Your sons and your daughters will prophesy. Your young men will see visions. Old men will dream dreams. On my servant, both men and women, I will pour out the Spirit in those days, and they will prophesy. The Lord has been speaking to me, and I am preparing not only the 11th hour workers, but those who are in the 11th hour, those who are well versed in wisdom, discernment, and revelatory understanding, and those who have been in and have the embers of revival still burning within, those who are still seeking after me with their whole heart, ready to run with me through their physical strength. Though their physical strength may be waning, they are pressing in for my strength to run the distance and finish well. Those who will hear my voice and speak my words to the dead bones, Ezekiel, yeah, that the great army will once again rise up and live. Okay, there was a lot more to this, but I'm going to leave it there because we don't have any time. But that is to say that we are here because it's time. This is divinely orchestrated. This was not a situation whereby any of us decided to do this panel. It was literally chosen for us, and we've honored it. You know, I mean, maybe we'll tell the story how this all came about another time. But I had this, you know, you spoke about the bronze figure, so Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel, and the writing on the wall, Mene Mene Tekel Uparsin.
Mm-hmm.
You referenced that, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I wrote a lot of notes in regards to what Peter said, but time is never enough.
Next week.
Well, you know, I'm thinking that you can carry this discussion forward to next week.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm going to see what we can do next week. I think we're going to do something very different, I think.
Okay, good.
So, I know that you're both busy. I'm very grateful to you both for having me share this time and space with you, and everybody that's watching at home. Thank you to all of you. And yeah, thank you, and till next week.
Till next week. Peter, would you like to leave the audience with some final words, and also how they can reach you and reach your work?
Sure, absolutely. We're in a state of flux. I'm looking for a new publisher at the moment, but if you'd like a copy of Letters to Earth, just write me directly, and at one peterkling.com, or join me at Facebook. Just look up Peter Kling, and right now I'm busy as anything because we're doing a lot of different great things, but I'm posting on Facebook from time to time, and you can keep up with me there until we get things a little bit more settled out. But with that, I know you are restricted for time, so I do want to say love and blessings to all. Alfred, 7, until next week.
Thank you.
Can I just also say to people, please subscribe to Alfred's channel. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. It's Alfred is it Alfred Webre or Alfred Lambremont Webre on YouTube, Alfred?
Yeah, on YouTube it's Alfred Lambremont Webre, or it's Exopolitics TV.
Okay, that's on YouTube. So subscribe if you haven't. Peter, do you have a YouTube channel?
Well, yes and no. I've been asked to start one, so there'll be one coming.
Okay, so look out for that, everybody, so that you can subscribe. And my YouTube channel, if you'd like to subscribe, is Solutionaries Media Network on YouTube. And that's SOULUTIONARIES Media Network. Please subscribe to that channel as well for regular updates. Particularly as they're trying to put me in prison for talking at the moment.
And visit 7 on Twitter, because she does the hashtag like campaign. A total ace. What's your Twitter again?
It's Solutionaries TV, actually. So if you just put SOUL, like soul music, Solutionaries, SOULUTIONRIES TV on Twitter. They are shadow banning me on everything. They've just shut down my Facebook again. So I only had it for 2 days, and then they shut it down, you know, so it's hardcore. The oppression of me right now is hardcore. So I need all your prayers, everybody. Thank you.
Well, you're in the full light here. You're not in shadow. So,
Thank you.
okay.
Thank you.
Until next week. Thank you.
Bye. 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 Bye.